This is the PTI Consulting podcast, hosted by Michelle Owen.
Welcome along then to the first PTI Consulting podcast. I want to introduce you to everyone that's here. There's four of us. My name's Michelle Owen. I'm a Sky Sports presenter presenting this podcast to you. We've got Mike. Mike, if you could fully introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Mike Bohndiek, founder and managing director of PTI Consulting.
And we've got Eric as well.
Yes, Eric Solem. I work across the commercial and application side of the business.
And last but by no means least, Daniel, tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, hi, Daniel Brown, and I'm the lead data strategist for PTI Consulting.
So this is our first podcast then. So Mike, you were the first to speak. Let's start with you. What is the difference between IT, digital and technology? Because we hear those phrases all the time, but how do you define the difference between them?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting mix. Digital in particular has probably become one of those buzz phrases that means a lot of things to a lot of people, and it's possibly the harder of the three to quantify. I guess when we think about IT, I often describe it as sort of the boring in the back of house. It's the pieces that people don't necessarily understand. It's the cables in the walls. It's the servers in the comms room, and it's the bit that the few rather than the many sort of get to see and understand, really. Whereas technology, I think everyone associates with. It's very much why we use the phrase around technology in the work that we do. Technology is your iPhone at home. It's your Alexa device. It's your smart doorbell. It's your security system, and it's things that you use in your day-to-day life. And I think what we're starting to see really is the coming together, particularly of IT and of technology, to make those things work in tandem. What do you need in your home environment to make technology work? Very little. Your home broadband connection will get the 90% of what you need done and across the line. What people then suffer from is that frustration of trying to take that into the work environment, into that Stadia environment or into the enterprise, and try and replicate the simplicity they have at home in what is a much more complex environment. And that's where sort of the friction almost exists between technology and IT, in that IT in its classic form is always the enabler for the technology at the top. So we see technology overall across four layers, starting at the top of a pyramid. You have data, which is sort of your starting point and your end point. It's your what are we capturing, and then how are we using it to understand what we're doing. It's your management information, it's your customer data, whatever it may be. And therefore, the next layer down is applications, helping to actually collect that data and analyse that data. And that's really sort of the technology side of the pyramid. That's what people understand. That's your commercial director buying a CRM. That's your head of retail buying a new POS system. That's your marketing manager using a new email communication tool. But when you drop the layer deeper into what we would describe as infrastructure, it's the infrastructure and classic IT that would support those applications which help you to get the data in the first place. And then the backhaul and connectivity is layer 4, powers the infrastructure. And what you really have to do to make those work collectively is have that pyramid in alignment, rather than have what would classically be a diamond. And that's really the difference between that home and enterprise environment. From a home perspective, you nearly always have that pyramid because your connectivity and Wi-Fi in the house will always be a strong wide base, and you'll very rarely use the capacity you have for that. And everything else above it will therefore work. In a Stadia environment, one of the great challenges that most people face is you have maybe 150 to 200 staff on a Monday to Friday, and then 25,000 other people turn up on a Saturday, and they want a great experience. They want to use their phone. They want to share it onto social. They want to engage with apps. They want to look at pre-ordering of pints or whatever it may be. And that's where IT in its classic form and technology in its sort of modern day form need to sit together. I think for me, digital is a phrase that needs defining almost per person. For some people, that simply means social media. For some people, that means anything that touches a website or a mobile phone. And for others, they're simply using it as a de facto word for technology. So, yeah, I think it's a really interesting environment at the minute when people talk about IT transformation, digital transformation, technology transformation. My first question back to most people is, and how are you defining that?
And it's really interesting to hear there's a whole pyramid to it, because I think in sort of layman's terms and for like me, like a customer at a stadium, when you go in, you certainly do not understand why you can't get on the Wi-Fi. So that's something we'll come on to a little bit later. But the way you've described it there, it now actually makes sense. You mentioned the data layer there. Daniel, you're the data man here, and we often hear that data is like oil. Data-driven decisions are key for any business. In your experience, we're talking about stadiums. Are clubs equipped to capitalise on the opportunities of data?
I think it varies across all the sports clubs. I think there's a high level of difference between them all. Are they all ready and able? No. I think one of the key things with sports clubs and in the UK and across the world is that they look at data in a siloed element. So you have, as Mike says, that you have people looking at the CRM side, you have people looking at management information, etc. It's about actually how you combine all of that. A lot of people think of data as the customer data. Well, a profit and loss account is data, a cash flow is data, what you sell on F&B is data, POS is data, and they actually all link together to actually drive a business forward. If you start to actually put that all together, you can actually start to define your marketing to help with your season ticket sales, with your single season ticket sales. You can then start to use, understanding who's coming to each game, to then use that for sponsorship use. Go to the right brands, assess the brand affinity, and start to actually generate revenue from sponsorship. And you can do it also by pricing of your F&B, etc., and actually utilising that to generate more money itself as well. I think from personal experience, a lot of it's been actually in the US and how I've worked with the likes of LA Kings in terms of, they want to do a load of data, but you take it step by step. So understand the customer first. They've got Wi-Fi in place, they had apps, etc. Start to actually understand, what they're buying transactionally, but not just tickets, what they purchase in terms of when they're actually at the stadium, and start to combine that. And things we've done is messaging to customers to give them a free drink because they're constant visitors or constant game attendees. One free drink actually escalates into about 3 or 4 more drinks which are purchased. Then it's a simple thing of, okay, you're coming out of the stadium, this is the 3rd single game that you've been to, why not get a half-season package or a season, like a Christmas package, and moving them up that cycle. And then there's the other thing about the pricing of the F&B, because if you're understanding who's coming, you can actually assess, what pricing you can do. And something which, for example, I did at AEG after doing all the initial work in terms of understanding the customer and using that for Marcoms, we actually started to use it operationally to understand what drinks were going to be served at what, when, where, and the pricing. We did that with Beyonce. I won't go into full details of the price increase that it did because it was interesting, but by identifying who's coming to that show, and I know this is not sports, but it does go across the whole entertainment and sports sphere, we were able to work with a partner to bring more champagne bars across the whole concourses, up the price of champagne because we knew who the customer was coming, and generate a significant amount of not revenue but profit increase by I call it CRM 101, the understanding of the customer, which then monetizes what you're doing. You then take all of that information, as I've mentioned, and you start working with it on the sponsorship side. Sponsors now aren't just willing to just cut a check just because it's a brand name. They want to get the ROI. So who are they talking to when the actual fan is there? Trying to actually identify the brand affinities, so you're actually targeting who you're going after to come out with sponsorship. So it covers the entirety of the business. But I think what needs to happen is it's connected to all digital, it's technological. It wraps everything around, like Mike said, but you have to do it stage by stage. What's going to give you the biggest bang for your buck to start off with, and you build momentum. You build momentum by monetizing data. You get more investment to then actually work out how you can actually monetize it even more with dashboarding, with more fancier, digital marketing platforms, etc.
And Eric, let's talk to you for a second, because you're a well-travelled man. You've spent time in Italy, the US, and the UK, across the ticketing, sales, and systems world. And we heard Daniel talking there about upsell and things like that. But how have you seen these areas specifically evolve for clubs?
Well, I think there's two things that I come back to often. One is there's such an abundance of choice of technology now as far as applications and ways to approach things, and also, the rapid pace of change makes you feel sometimes when you're on the client side, it is hard to keep up with. We faced this challenge when I was at Roma in upgrading some of the systems, and I think for clubs and venues the same. It's the ticketing system that is seen as it's that customer-facing system that your fans and your attendees of any event are interacting with first, and that becomes the whole starting point for the customer journey. And then where are you plugging in other things, other applications to collect that data so that you can do the stuff that Dan was talking about. Those are real challenges that we see, that I faced in the past. We also see with our clients at PTI, and that's where we try and help them with too, is what are the right choices to make? What are the effective choices to build on the pyramid that Mike was talking about? Because it's very easy, especially when you're a big brand, a club, and you get approached constantly by application vendors, new widgets and gadgets and apps everywhere. But you really got to stay focused on building the pyramid in the right way. Otherwise, you can get lost very easily, and that customer journey can be a bit fractured. And the data can sit in all sorts of different places. Yes.
And I think from a ticketing point of view, one of the shifts in the application marketplace has been that the ticket used to be the start and the stop point. Ticketing platforms were there to sell a ticket, and they were there to issue a ticket. And
paper.
If you wind the clock back 20 years, everything was in paper. So that was the end of your transaction. You went to a box office window. You asked them you told them how many you wanted. They gave you tickets. You gave them cash, and away you walked with your ticket. And that was the end of that ticketing journey. Now, ticketing is almost a stop-off point as one of the many engagement touch points for someone about to attend an event. It very much goes from that pre-sale cycle of getting them interested in the event and those digital marketing tools and etc. that Daniel was talking about, through into converting and purchasing. But then it's what do you do with them in between times? We've migrated now again from upsells in the basket. That was all the rage 10 years ago, and now we can sell them their first glass of champagne at the same time as selling the ticket. Now, as Daniel was alluding to, you can get to know the person via interaction post-ticket purchase, understand more about what they want, tailor the offering to them, and therefore leverage and yield far more from a revenue perspective than you would ever have done in a much more generic world. So I think that those applications, everyone has now got an element of engagement to them. Your classic, I'm a ticketing system, I'm a retail system. Everything is now I'm a customer system. With a particular focus on.
Yeah, and some of the really interesting things in the marketplace today are, we faced this challenge before at Roma. Someone buys 4 tickets, I only know the purchaser. Absolutely. The other 3 people entering my building, I had no knowledge of. And now with digital ticketing and mobile ticketing, there are solutions to that problem, and everyone's trying to achieve that goal, I think.
Absolutely, and I think across the market as well, from my ticketing experience over the past few years and some of the tender documents I've seen, it's never just a ticketing system document or tender document. They want the package, but it's interesting that they need to, it's great that they're thinking like that, but they then need to, as Mike's alluded to with the pyramid, it needs to expand across the ticketing, and the digital pieces that they're looking at is the overall technological element that you need to put in. So there's a good understanding that ticketing isn't just ticketing now. But I think you can go one more step with what we do in terms of that pyramid and actually looking holistically at everything.
Mike, we're talking about apps here a lot and how that is really beneficial to clubs and stadiums and, identifying with a fan base and, I guess, interacting with them more. Are there any other top technology tips that clubs can start to think about to help them with more fan engagement?
I think there's a couple of things, really. I mean, picking up on the app point, the thing for those, as is the case for a lot of technology, it's about knowing the purpose. And I think there's been a lot of technology deployed into that sporting marketplace on the basis that the person next door is doing it. There is an app at this club, so there needs to be an app at this club, or someone just looks at it, and it's done done without a huge amount of thought. Some common stats around people opening an app for the first time who don't have a great experience. About 40% of them will never return to it. It'll leave your phone immediately, or it will just sit there and collect dust. So I think one of the real top tips is to have a real clarity as to what you're looking to achieve with technology and link it to your business objectives. Understand how you're going to get that commercial ROI. What are you looking to do for it? Is it commercial eyeballs? Is it increasing the digital ad space in your app? Is it purely a cost of sale item and you're happy to write it off because it's just what people expect, and therefore we're happy to bake it into the P&L for the ticketing team, for example? Or is it helping you with operations? The classic story in this sort of space is always the pre-ordering of a pint in the F&B world that is so important as a revenue stream to most clubs and venues. When it generates operational efficiencies in terms of the speed of sale and the speed of service and commercial growth, ideally, through the ease of sale and making it easy for you to purchase through. I'm sure I, like many others, have been in a stadium at half time and looked at the queue for food or drink and thought, do you know what, I'll just wait until full time. And that sort of perception then becomes a challenge for those clubs to deliver a smart service around. But if you just throw something in without really understanding why, or you're doing it because the neighbour's doing it, or you've done it because someone's come and offered you a solution, or they might even have given it to you for free, but you haven't got the back office team or the back office knowledge or support around you to actually make that worthwhile, you'll end up with a really average product. And actually, probably the best tip for fan engagement is to not do engagement if you're not ready to. There is a lot of sort of token engagement.
Outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely, and the fans will react to that poorly. They will start to push back against that, because the best and the worst thing about sport is that people are emotive. They're emotively involved in your business. And the example I often use is if you're annoyed at Tesco, you can go to Sainsbury's. If you're annoyed at Marks and Spencer's, you can go to Debenhams. If you're annoyed at your football club, you'll just shout at your football club until you find something to change. Because you're not going to go over to a rival team simply because they've got a better shirt than you do, or their pre-ordering app is better than yours is. You're emotively connected to it, and that emotive connection often gets sort of missed in terms of technology deployment. It becomes a functional deployment that leads with, we'll give them news, we'll then give them this, we'll then give them that, without thinking of what is the culture of our fan base, what are they actually looking for, what are the fans telling us about what they want this club to look like, and how can we reflect that back to them in a product or service that can be technologically enabled to help them move with the times and just the general rate of technological advancement, but then also reflect the emotive bit, because you can be almost over smart in terms of those engagement pieces and rush something out that ticks all the boxes. It allows you to talk about being innovative, it allows you to talk about fan engagement, it allows you to talk about being digital first, or any of these great buzz phrases. But if it's not going to land and it's not going to deliver the outcomes from a fan perspective, then you're really sort of wasting not only your time and money, but also burning through the goodwill of the fan base who are emotively connected to you.
I think that's a really key point, that if you look at across anything with, for example, apps, how much customer research actually goes into what the actual fan or the customer wants, and it's very little, because it's a tick in the box. And I think one of the key things to do is actually have that engagement to understand what's needed. And whilst this isn't related to sports or entertainment, British Airways did an amazing thing in terms of talking to their customers. What do they want as a minimal viable product? They wanted the ticket in the app, they wanted notifications of what's going on with their flight, and that's how it launched, with just that. And then they took it step by step by engaging with the customers. And I think there's lessons to be learned from other verticals in terms of how you develop, to make sure that you developing digitally what is important, what the fan actually wants.
That's why, from our point of view, we always set up governance committees with our clients and help them sort of understand 4 key items through 4 key questions. So the 4 key items that we sort of highlight are IT and technology alignment, as we've discussed already. What's the return on investment? What's the capability and efficiencies that we need to deliver it well? And what are the standards and methods that we're going to use to deploy this? And really that drives 4 key questions. That drives are we doing things right? Are we getting the benefits? Are we getting them done well? And are we doing things in the right way? which helps to really start to frame some of those decisions. So when we start to look at almost the decision-making filters of why we might go with one app or over another, or why we might say actually it's not the right time to deliver an app, coming back to sort of core values and core questions like that really helps us to put a sense check into these processes.
And Eric, we've talked, about how and what would be good for fans. As these sport and entertainment venues become 365 businesses, how does the role of technology change then, and what sort of needs to be done?
Well, it becomes fundamental, not only to the operation of the building, but to how you commercialize it, for the experience, all the pieces that we've sort of touched on. I mean, I think it's interesting to hear from you, too. You're unique in the fact that you get to go to more stadium than most of us do. And what have you experienced? You talked about in your blogs also the challenge of being able to operate with Wi-Fi and connectivity. What's that like week in, week out, not knowing what you're going to face?
It's super tricky because most grounds do struggle with the huge crowds they get on a Saturday, 30,000 people. And as we said earlier, everyone wants to get on the Wi-Fi. Everyone wants to get on the 4G. So you're watching a game. And when I'm on Soccer Saturday, personally, I sort of tune out to what's going on elsewhere because you're so focused on what's happening in your game because you need to get the names of every player right and things like that. And at half time, you go to check your phone and it's just that, the spinning wheel and you can't get on any websites. The Wi-Fi, often the Wi-Fi won't work on the gantry. It works in the press box, but because the gantry is the opposite side, everyone on the gantry can't get on the Wi-Fi. It's just too far for the signal. And obviously, as you guys all know very well, when there's loads of people, you can't get on 4G. It just doesn't load. So it's a really important thing as a fan as well. Your teams, at half time, you want to know what the other scores are. You want to text your friends, WhatsApp people and say, do you want to go down for a beer or whatever if they're in another stand? And half the time you can't get hold of who you need to get hold of as well. It's a problem that a lot of media press rooms are out of signal areas because they don't have windows, so they're like downstairs or they're in the depths of the stadium, and you need to phone your producer and you can't. So it's going to be really interesting to see how stadiums and clubs develop now to sort of cater for not just reporters and journalists, but for the fans as well, so they can simply get hold of their mates.
I mean, it goes back to your earlier question about 365 days a year venues, and every one of our clients and all the people that we talk to, connectivity, Wi-Fi is one of the key challenges, and it's that odd challenge for a stadium or a venue where, as Mike said, day in, day out, you might have 50, 100 people working in the building that need connectivity, and then you have these burst moments where there's 25 or 40,000, and that presents really unique problems.
I think it's one of the big challenges for stadium, primarily because it is a driver of configurability. And what I mean by that is, stadia are competing with home, they're competing with broadcast, they're competing with other leisure activities. And what people are ultimately looking for is that individual experience and that configurability. So you're trying to fight a fan being able to sit at home, watching a broadcast feed where they can change the angles, where they can pause it, where they can rewind it, where they can change the commentary feeds, where they can also have an iPad next to them where they're looking at stats and looking at other games. They're connected to Wi-Fi, they're on the phone to a friend, and they can configure everything about that environment because they're at home. They can configure the heat, they can configure when they go and get a drink, they can configure everything that you want. And then, of course, you go into a stadium environment and there may be 40,000 general admission fans and you're all treated the same. And when there is no connectivity, that will always be the case because you will simply have the same food and beverage concessions to be able to go to. You'll be in a similar price seat in a similar type location, but you've got very different people there. When you have the sort of the technology pyramid aligned, that connectivity at the bottom, you can then personalise the content, the information, and allow them to configure the stadium around them. So whilst I might pay the same ticket price as the guy sat next to me, he may be 10, 20 years older or 10, 20 years younger, and may want different things based on that demographic. There are so many different and personal drivers that have people coming to stadium for an experience that we have to be able to hit. And fundamentally, without using buzzwords like Generation X and Millennial as the as the next generation of fans come through, they will have grown up with it. For most of us in this room, we grew up unplugging the phone to plug the broadband in, and you had the choice of 56k dial-up or being able to dial out on a phone without having a mobile.
Yes, that's how the modem connecting.
Absolutely, the dots and the buzzing. That was the world of yesterday, and so your fan experience on a match day. For me, when I first started going to football, was very much you were disconnected the moment you left the house. As you went to go, you got to the ground, you bought a program, you read it cover to cover because it was the only source of information about what you were about to see. You watched the game live, and then you waited 5 or 6 hours for the replays to come on, and that was the only way you could interact on the day. The next generation of fans are used to click of the button, 8-second Twitter rule, and engaging on a very quick and configurable basis. And if stadiums want to replicate that as a part of the fight to stop attendances dropping and keep their revenues and their marketing budgets high from that ticketing income stream, we're going to have to find ways to do that. And fundamentally, connectivity is a driver for it.
And the other interesting challenge there is also we see with our clients and others is that you have brand new stadium that have been designed for this, and they're cutting edge. And then you have buildings that were built in the 30s, 40s, and 50s that had, there was no concept of the need for connectivity and these kinds of experiences, and how they adapt is also is an interesting challenge.
And we've touched on it a lot, and I think you've discussed the challenges there. If each of you now could try and, in a sentence, summarise what technology should be doing for a club or venue. We've touched on it there, but if you could sort of try and summarise it, each of you. If we'll start with you, Mike, and go round.
Yeah, for me, fundamentally, in a sentence, it should be a revenue generator, no longer a cost centre.
Eric?
Well, you stole mine.
Yeah.
Well, the other side of that is, look at it, technology investments. You have an opportunity to optimize and to create efficiencies within the business. And that's what software has done, across the board for everyone. So, looking for efficiency in investments is a sentence I would use.
And finally, Daniel?
Slightly off piece, but it is regarding data. I'm going to go with a quote from Bill Gates, which is, how you gather, manage and use information will determine whether you win or lose. I like that. And I think that this encompasses everything that we've been talking about.
Absolutely. And each of you as well, I'd be really interested to know what is the best stadium experience you've had, either working there or just going as a fan. We'll start again with Mike.
Well, I'm an Arsenal fan, so it's going to revolve around that. I think it's an important point in terms of all the things that we've spoken about here, about the emotive pull of sport and what it means in the Bernabeu in 05-06 season, winning 1-0 over there, Henry scoring. Just the atmosphere in that away end, and just sort of the culture and togetherness of the fans in that piece made that, outside of clearly the results, made that a really sort of memorable standout moment. It's always the one that immediately springs to mind. And I think that drives that point home a little bit about it's got to be about the culture as well. We can't turn the fans into robots because for so many, a big part of the experience is the togetherness of that fan base and coming together for a common cause.
And what about you, Eric? What's been your best experience, either working or as a fan?
Well, what comes to mind, one of the most unique experiences, when the box office at Stadio Olimpico in Rome, that's about a 65,000 seat stadium. And a couple of years ago when Francesco Totti retired, you couldn't find another seat in the building. We had requests come in from all over the world, people literally flying in from India to see his last match. And that was a very interesting ticketing challenge and also a very emotional game to see that his retirement ceremony after the match had ended, every single person stayed in the stadium for another hour and a half, and half of them were crying. That's one I'll always remember.
Oh, wow. I would have loved to have been there. And what about you, Daniel?
I'd probably say 2014 LA Kings Stanley Cup win. It was just, I haven't spent a lot of time there. I became quite a bit of a Kings fan. And being there, and it goes to what Mike says in terms of, but it was also the interaction between all the fans, but also all the team and the staff and the AEG staff. It was just a memorable thing after many, many years without ever winning the cup. And then breaking off a piece of ice off the actual pitch and keeping hold of that. So for me, that was probably the most emotive experience.
It's amazing. All three of those sound, you can just picture them and see them in your head. Mike, tell me about the event that you've got coming up in July at Edgbaston.
Yeah, we're really excited about it. It's the Stadium Technology Insight event, so it's sort of drilling in a little bit more detail really to the themes and topics that we've spoken about today. How do you utilise commercial to drive that ROI from a technology standpoint? How do you connect commercial and operations to drive those efficiencies that sort of Eric was talking about? And it's shaping up to be a really good day. We've got 40 clubs and venues signed up now. It's completely vendor free, so just a nice, slightly more relaxed, non-sales environment. We're not speaking, our clients are speaking, and in fact some of our non-clients are speaking to some of our friends and colleagues in the industry, taking different views of data and applications, taking a view on non-match day, conference and events, and utilising your building on a 365 basis, and a panel, all followed by the Birmingham Bears versus Derbyshire Falcons in the T20 Blast over a drink and some hospitality. So it's going to be a great day of networking and just sharing in some of the stories, some of the pains that people have had with tech, and some of the successes they've had. And really it's just to help the industry collectively and our client base learn from each other, and sort of therefore accelerate their technological growth in the right sort of way.
Brilliant. And I think you guys have got a couple of questions for me on what it's like to be sort of out and about and working as a reporter in these venues.
We're dying to know some insights about the banter you have between yourself and Jeff on a Saturday.
Do you know what? With Jeff, it's literally what you see is what you get. Like if you go to the Christmas party with him, or if you bump into him on the street, he's the nicest man. There was a long-running thing last year about a hat I wore on a shoot because it was so windy down in Swansea. I had to wear a hat. If not, you just wouldn't have seen my face because of my hair. And he saw the video and he made a joke of it. And I managed to sort of back that he wanted a hat for his hairline, put it that way. And to be fair, Jeff actually has a good head of hair for someone in their early 60s, shall we say. And I saw him the next day or the next couple of days in the office. I was like, Jeff, do you really want to get rid of me off Soccer Saturday? Because he was like, that's it, that's her final appearance. And he's just so lovely. He's, like I say, what you see is what you get. And you never know what he's going to say. I think a lot of people think we know what he's going to come to us with, or it's pre-rehearsed or something like that. But his one-liners and stuff like that, it's all completely spontaneous. And he's always up for a laugh. And you know you can give as good as you get with Jeff, and he won't be insulted at all. It's absolutely fine.
You know where you're going to be on match day one with the schedules being out now?
No, I don't. My problem this year is I live down in the southwest, and we've got Bristol City, Swansea and Cardiff. And I actually live down the road from Bristol City. But the way we work is we sort of move people across the country, depending on where the games are. So I probably won't be quite as local all the time this year, but it's really quite likely I'll be at one of those three clubs quite a lot. But it just depends. They'll have a little look at the schedule and which club is where and where the stories could be. And that's how we choose what games we go to, where the stories are unfolding through the season. So won't know yet. We'll probably find out end of July, but I already cannot wait.
Yeah, it's great to have a little bit of a behind-the-scenes insight from Soccer Saturday. It's been a staple part of my footballing routine for a long period of time. So thanks for that, Michelle.
No, good. Yeah, we love doing it. It's a highlight of every week. That's what we've got time for. So thank you so much to Mike, to Eric, and to Daniel. Hopefully it's given me a real insight into sort of the challenges and perhaps solutions for stadiums and clubs facing the technology and the pyramid that Mike talked about at the start as well was really insightful. So thank you very much for listening, and we'll catch you again soon.
Thanks for listening to the PTI Consulting podcast. Find out more about us at pticonsulting.co.uk.